Hey guys, what's up? Darcy here at 6 Strings 9 Lives. Finally, the long-awaited Black Sabbath ranking I've been talking about, promising, you asking about also, which I do appreciate that very much. One of the bigger discographies that I've tackled, along with bands like Scorpions, I think Motorhead, 22 studio albums, something like that. Kiss, Overkill, which that one will have to be updated also. Probably in about 6 to 8 months. Like I said before, I don't like to just slap together any of these. That's why it's taken some time for this one, and I do apologize for that. And I'm not the type of guy who's going to say, this is going to change, you should come back next week because this might change. For bands like Black Sabbath or bands that are no longer around, it's not really going to change for me. I just can't see it. There is degrees. Like today, there's 19 studio albums, and I will include a 20th, which is the 2009 album by Heaven and Hell, which for all intents and purposes is Black Sabbath. So I want to include that one in this ranking. But for parts of these rankings, maybe the very bottom or the very top, there's quite a bit of separation, especially with this band. But in the middle, it's just all preference. And I'm not going to go on and talk for 2 minutes to defend myself. That's not what these are all about. These are just for fun. And for the most part, people do realize that. You do get the odd clown here who is just here to argue and whatever. Life's too short for that shit. So anyways, let's get on with this. Hopefully not too long of a ranking, but it'll be as long as it is. 20 studio albums. Like I said, we're going to count that Heaven and Hell album. I will talk about, the year the album came out, maybe some lineup changes. There's a shitload of lineup changes with these albums. We'll talk about some favorite tracks, and let me know in the comments where some of these lie with you. Let me know your favorites. Rank them all in the comments if you'd like. I'd love to hear from that, hear about that from you. So let's get started. There's going to be one probably no surprise at the bottom, and maybe if you know this channel and you've watched me, you might not, or my number one won't be a big surprise, but it will be fun to look at the ones in the middle. So coming in at number 20 from 1995 is Forbidden. Let me grab this out of here. I'm going to use I have all CDs today. We're going to show. I only have a few of these on vinyl, and but nothing wrong with these CDs. So here's the cover for Forbidden. And the one thing I'll mention right off the top is Black Sabbath. First of all, I'm a logo guy. I love a good logo. I love a good consistent logo. And I love a band that will change up their logo. And Black Sabbath has pretty much done that for their whole career. And it's okay. It fits with me. It's not like Iron Maiden where you got that iconic, legendary logo. Black Sabbath is named, not that Iron Maiden doesn't speak for itself, but Black Sabbath is Black Sabbath. So here's number 20. So like I said, 1995. Probably no surprise this is at the bottom. There's just not a lot of memorable stuff on here. And you always have to, when you mention this album, you have to mention that Ice-T was on here, which I have no problem with Ice-T in his own element, but bringing him on here and having that Ernie C produce this album, I did hear that this was up for a remix, and I hope it does. There is some decent tracks on here, but nothing that just jumps out at you memorable. I think Shaking Off the Chains was one, or Guilty as Hell, I forget which, in the title track, isn't too bad. But that opening of Illusion of Power just set the pace to just take a dive for me. But there's my number 20. And yeah, hopefully we get reissues of all these Black Sabbath albums. Coming in at number 19 is their 12th studio album from 1986, which was, this. And if you are watching this, you know a lot of this stuff already, but this was intended to be a Tony Iommi solo album. This features Glenn Hughes on vocals, and he does a great job. you know, the latest stuff that I've heard with Glenn Hughes with the Dead Daisies. I mean, the guy still sounds great, but lower at the list, but there is a few good tracks. Other than Forbidden, that there's not much that I just outright dislike with Black Sabbath. They have a very good catalog overall, and even with the shittiest albums in your collection, you can always find a couple of good tracks. But yeah, Eric Singer on drums also on this one, called Seventh Star, if I didn't even mention that, 1986. Tracks that I enjoy, well, I think the one bigger hit on here was No Stranger to Love, the title track, and Heart Like a Wheel, I believe. That was another one that kind of jumped out to me, or Turn to Stone. But yeah, let me know if you got a few favorite tracks on this one, of course. There we go, number 19. Coming in at number 18, and I actually did feature this one on, I've mentioned this in several ranking videos, but I featured this album in a video that I did called 10 Terrible Albums That Weren't Saint Anger. And I got a little bit of flack on this one, but I think people were just missing the point. I didn't want to state the obvious that Forbidden is their absolute crappiest album, but this one I just didn't. It's grown on me a little bit. It's very consistent, not very inventive, just kind of, digging into the riff vault or something. But coming in at number 18 is their 19th overall studio album. 13 from 2013, we got Ozzy on an album for the first time since Never Say Die. Geezer Butler back on bass, first time since, I think, Cross Purposes. But this one just kind of, it's got a couple of standout tracks to me, and I think my favorite track on here is Loner. And at the time of that video where I was saying 10 terrible albums, the word terrible, it doesn't really totally apply to this because it's not terrible, but it's just definitely lower in the ranking, and it didn't jump out on me. The other thing is, I can't believe that this thing is 10 years old already. It feels, to me, it still feels newer. Yeah, number 18, 13. Coming in at number 17, and I see this one, in the rankings that I've watched of Black Sabbath over the years, you'll see this one kind of mid or really low. And I guess in the scheme of things, this one is low. This is their 8th studio album from 1978, Never Say Die, the last to feature Ozzy, like I said, until all the way to 2013's 13. Just not one of my favorites of the first 8 albums that Black Sabbath put out, but there's a couple cool tracks on here I enjoy. Never Say Die is the best track on this album, the title track. Johnny Blade, not too bad. Junior's Eyes. But yeah, the rest just kind of starts losing me. Air Dance is was that an instrumental? I forget. But and Swinging the Chain, which Ozzy didn't even want to sing. Bill Ward sings on that song. Or does he? Yeah, Swinging the Chain, I'm sure he does. But produced by Black Sabbath. Yeah, self-producing their albums at that point. I think some of this was co-written by someone else. I just can't remember exactly. But to put this into perspective a little bit, 1978, well, there was a fantastic album that came out from, actually, this band, Judas Priest, called Stained Class. And, you hold that up against this, it's a no-brainer. You know which one's better. But yeah, there is my number 17 from 1978. Never Say Die. Number 16. And the other thing I'll mention here, I got a pretty good, vocalists, up and downs here. Not everything's lumped into one pile. And some of the rankings that I have watched where they just kind of throw all the Tony Martin era in one lump sum, it doesn't make sense to me. There is some fantastic albums. And Forbidden is not one of them, but the other 4, pretty cool. So here is my number 16th or 17th overall studio album from 1994. This is Cross Purposes. This is the album that is in between, actually, the album that's in between the Tony Martin and Tony Martin is Dehumanizer. But this one came 2 years after. Yeah, 2 years after Dehumanizer. Cross Purposes. We'll mention a couple of tracks. We got Still Geezer Butler on bass, of course. Gotta say, Tony Iommi, the riff master. I might say that once or twice for sure. But this one's just more, it's a good album, but it's just more like this. It just levels. It never has too many big peaks in it, but some tracks to check out though. Cross of Thorns, Virtual Death, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, and the lead-off track isn't bad at all, Eyewitness. But yeah, just not a real, it doesn't have those stronger songs that jump out. So there is my number 16, 1994. And you know what's going on in 1994 with metal and hard rock and hanging on, still putting out albums, some of these bands, which is cool. My number 15 is that 20th album that we're throwing in the bunch, because really it's a Black Sabbath album. And I was very fortunate to see them on not this tour, but as this incarnation, and we'll talk a little bit about that also. So this is number 15 from 2009. This is Heaven and Hell, The Devil You Know. Let me take out this. So yeah, I got to see them in 2007, actually, when they got together and started touring on the Black Sabbath, the Dio years. And but let's finish talking about this one, because this one's got a couple of absolute killer tracks. Number one for sure, Bible Black. And where is it? And sorry about that. Adam and Evil, the first track. Those are my two favorites, but if I have to pick one track only, Bible Black is just nice, dark Black Sabbath with probably some of the darkest stuff that Dio, well, there's some dark stuff on Dehumanizer, but we'll get to that one too. But there is my number 15. So got to see them 2007. Megadeth opened for them. Down was also supposed to be the, whatever, the pre-opener or whatever you want to call it, but Down canceled. But I still got to see Megadeth, and the one and only time I got to see Black Sabbath and one of my favorite singers of all time, Ronnie James Dio, and that was off of this. This was released in 2007, so that was the same year as that tour. And they actually played, on that tour, they played 3 songs off of Dehumanizer, but they also played, there's 3 new tracks on here, which they played The Devil Cried and Shadow of the Wind off of this. So if you weren't aware that there was some new recordings on here, sorry about the glare there. But yeah, there's some, I think 3 new recordings on here, and then they played they played TV Crimes, or they played After All the Dead for sure. I think they actually led off with that track. So anyways, number 15, 2009. Yeah, just glad I got to see that, because I don't think, well, I'm sure I've had other opportunities, but just happy to have seen Ronnie James Dio fronting Black Sabbath. And at the time, I mean, I'll throw in another little tidbit. He's a small man, but he, to me, commands the stage like he is 10 feet tall and bulletproof. He just knows how to handle the crowd. He knows, and just powerful vocals. So, and you got to think, 2007 and then 2009, he was, he only had a few years left on Earth, and, maybe things were already, starting to go downhill with him, but sadly missed. Anyways, let's move on to my number 14, 13th overall studio album from 1987. Another Tony Martin era album. And this one has one of my all-time favorite Black Sabbath songs, period. I would put it in a list of, 20 to 30 songs, and that's called The Shining. Love that track. So yeah, this is the first with yes, the first with Tony Martin era. And if you've watched my channel in any extended period of time, you know that I am sure hoping for a Tony Martin era box set, or however they're going to do it. I just hope it's not some sort of best of. It deserves more than just a best of. It needs individual packaging, whether it be little, 5 little sleeves, or even if they could include the live cross purposes live, that would be cool too. But anyways, just a suggestion, or throw it down in the comments. I'm sure if there is, or if you're watching this, there's quite a few actual Tony Martin era fans for sure, because it's overlooked, and sometimes I just really want to promote it a little more than, or give it a little more love than it gets sometimes. But yeah, besides The Shining, which is just a fantastic song, Glory Ride, great riff in that one too, and also which other one? Lost Forever. Lost Forever has got a real actual Priest vibe to it. Kind of a 84 Priest vibe guitar riff. And what you'll get with all these, there's a shitload of riffs. It's full of riffs, so if I don't mention that enough, I'm sorry, but you already know with Black Sabbath. So there's number 14. Number 13. Here is an album that I pretty much would have put towards the bottom a few years ago. I kind of, shelved it initially. And keep in mind that when the Black Sabbath's debut album came out, I was 2 years old. So I really didn't get into Black Sabbath until 83. I probably, even at the time, didn't even put together, I probably did between 83 and 84, put together that Ronnie James Dio was a part of Black Sabbath. And in 82, when I was listening to that early Ozzy solo stuff, I don't know if I put 2 and 2 together at the time. So I would say I discovered Black Sabbath around 83 and really, took off from there. And then there was parts where, things dropped off a bit. But anyways, here's an album that I do see lower in lists, but I really learned to love this album. Not the entire thing, but I think it's underrated. This is Technical Ecstasy from, 1976, 7th overall studio album. I think it gets lumped together with Never Say Die as the last 2 of the first 8 studio albums with Black Sabbath, and probably unfairly so, but there's some killer songs on here. Yes, it's not as doomy and gloomy. I totally get it. But Backstreet Kids, great song. It's Alright, Gypsy, All Moving Parts Stand Still, love that. Rock and Roll Doctor, Dirty Women, a shorter album. That's in the years where they're pumping out the 31-minute albums, or some, anywhere from 27 to 33-minute albums, 36-minute albums. But yeah, there it is, number 13. Technical Ecstasy from 1976. All right, quick drink. Now this one, I think at times people feel obligated to put this one higher up in the ranking, and just because I'm going to hold this one up next doesn't mean I think less of it. I want to give it, my opinion of where it should go. But I think people do put it up higher at times. And if they're maybe a little older than me and they really got into this band, then I totally get it. But as a fan that got in a little bit later, I get it, but I don't hold it as high as you do maybe. But anyways, enough babbling on. Coming in at number 12, their first overall studio album. That iconic cover that we all know, that eerie, creepy sounding album, that heavy sound, like something you've never heard before, all in here. Of course, you got, the title band song, Black Sabbath, The Wizard, great track. And then you go into things like NIB, Wicked World. But great album. That's where it all started, people say. And, you know, I won't argue that point. But there is my number 12, self-titled, from 1970. And coming in number 11, their second album from 1970 is Paranoid. Now, this is, you're getting into just really, really good albums. So like I said before, I'm not separating much here, but here's the cover without the glare, which, you know, these covers, I probably don't really need to hold them up. All right, tracks like obviously Iron Man, a track that I probably don't ever need to hear again. It's burnt right here in my head. Paranoid, great track too. Planet Caravan, been covered quite a few times, that track. A couple of favorites on here too. Hand of Doom, I really like that song, and Jack the Stripper, Fairies Wear Boots. So there it is, Paranoid, coming in at number 11. All right, top 10 underrated Tony Martin era album coming up next, and that is TYR, Tear, from 1990. 15th studio album. We got, of course, like I said, we featured Tony Iommi is on all of these albums. He is the only one that has appeared on every one of these albums. Tony Martin on vocals, Cozy Powell on drums. What can I tell you about this album? You need to check it out. It is one of those really awesome Tony Martin albums. Anna Monday, the first track, awesome. Jerusalem, there's another one to check out. The Sabbath Stones and Valhalla. Those are probably my top 4 for sure. But I think this is one of those ones that's just overlooked. And I think my opinion is if you're looking at Black Sabbath vocalists, like we've had Ian Gillan, Glenn Hughes, did I even mention? Glenn Hughes was the vocalist on, yes, I did mention that, on Seventh Star. Ian Gillan, what I was saying, and Tony Martin. Tony Martin is the closest, he's more closer to Dio's style and range than he is, of course, he's kind of way over from Ozzy, and Ian Gillan is Ian Gillan. So, but anyways, onwards to number 9, their 5th overall studio album from 1973. Again, like I mentioned before, so there's their logo on this one right here. But yeah, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Let me bust this out of here. Get that glare off there. Another unique cover from Black Sabbath. But yeah, 1973. So, and that's the one other thing. I don't have a super big pile of 70s stuff in my collection. You know, you have some Priest, some Motorhead. Well, yeah, Motorhead just there, and Priest, some Black Sabbath for sure, some 70s Kiss, but this is 1973, so I was 5 years old. I definitely wasn't into this at the time. I was probably still watching Sesame Street or something like that, but great album. It kind of hurt me to even have, not hurt me, but have it only at number 9, but 9 and up, these are all just superb. Title track, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. National Acrobat, awesome track, Sabracadabra. Metallica did a cover of that years ago, did a good job too. Killing Yourself to Live, I really enjoy that one too. And this one wraps up with Spiral Architect, another cool track produced by Black Sabbath. So that is my number 9. Number 8 is another one of my favorites. Probably don't need to say that, but this is the 16th studio album. Overall from 1992, Dehumanizer. Of course, you know that this one features Ronnie James Dio, Vinny Appice on drums. So 1992, which actually I put this album on in the background on purpose today, because if you know this album and you know Dio Strange Highways, Dio this was 92. Strange Highways is 93. To me, and whatever, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe you think the same. These are brother-sister albums. They're very, very similar in style. I think maybe even Strange Highways has some leftover tracks that Ronnie brought to the table for this album that were maybe used on that album. I don't know for sure. I'll still put this one above that one. I mean, Tracy G is good on there, but he's not Tony Iommi. But anyways, here is my number 8, Dehumanizer. The kind of the reunion of these two guys in between, those two Tony Martin era albums. Tracks to check out on here: Computer God, After All the Dead. But my favorite track on here is called I. Check that one out. Great track. So there's number 8 from 1992, Strange Highways. Number 7, another super underrated album in my opinion. Well, maybe I shouldn't even be saying that, super underrated. I think this one will be, let's rephrase that. This one's hit and miss with people. Either they love it, or they possibly hate it, or they just don't give a shit about it. It's a one only, it's a one-off. It's Born Again from 1983, 11th studio album. Ian Gillan on vocals. Yes, we know the muddy production, we know that, but even with cleaned up production, I'll tell you, with cleaned up production, this thing would even rank higher with me, because every song, just about every song, is great. I mean, Trashed, Disturbing the Priest, Zero the Hero. I remember that frickin' almost disturbing type of video back in the day. Digital Bitch, the title track, Born Again, fantastic. Even wraps up with a cool track called Keep It Warm. So there's your lineup back then. We have Bill Ward, everybody original except for Ian Gillan. I did read that Ian really didn't like the final mix of this album, so hopefully Tony is working on that one next, and we'll see a box set of that come out, because I would definitely buy it. I think it's just a unique album. It's just got a different atmosphere. I mean, you got to think this one came after Mob Rules, and to this, pretty cool. And then, of course, in 1983, you have Dio doing Holy Diver, fantastic stuff like that. Which I will mention, all the great stuff from Dio's, Dio Band and Ozzy's, especially those first 6 Ozzy albums, fantastic. Let's continue with number 6, and my favorite of the Tony Martin era, Headless Cross. Let's bust this out of the cover too. This is their 14th overall studio album. What year is that? 1989. Absolute killer album. 2 of my, and I would put these into my favorite Black Sabbath songs. The Headless Cross, the title track, just a great opener. It actually opens with a little pre bit called The Gates of Hell, then Headless Cross. Devil and Daughter, great track. But my favorite track on here is When Death Calls. The riff on there is so heavy. It continues that whole heaviness throughout the whole track. Fantastic song. So if you don't know this album, Headless Cross, check out When Death Calls. You will love it, I think. Killing the Spirit World, another good track. Wraps up with Nightwing. I think there's actually a bonus track after Nightwing, but it's not listed on here. But yeah, Nightwing's a good closer too. So that is, this is one of those albums that desperately needs a reissue. So hopefully that whole Tony Martin thing comes together. It's supposed to come out this year. If you've heard any latest news, please throw it down in the comments for me. That is my number 6. Number 5 is Volume 4. 4th overall studio album, 1972, containing one of my favorite Black Sabbath songs, Wheels of Confusion / The Straightener. I don't know, this is just a great Ozzy era album. One that I never tire of. You know it well. It's got the bigger hit Changes on it, but Changes is, I'm not going to say my least favorite track on there, but it's not a super big highlight for me. Cornucopia, Snowblind, another great track, but man, Wheels of Confusion alone is worth the price of admission on this one. There's the back. So there is my number, what did I say? Number 5. Only 4 left. Number 4 is their third overall studio album from 1971, Master of Reality. And one of the Black Sabbath albums that I backtracked to first, when I first, like I said, 1982, 83, and I started, digging into the older Black Sabbath. And I used to have a lot of these on cassettes, but those are no longer around. But here's Master of Reality, which I said number 4. This one just got a great atmosphere. Sweet Leaf, love that track. My favorite track on here, I love After Forever. Into the Void, Lord of This World, another great song. And of course you got the bigger hit, Children of the Grave. You got an instrumental on here also, but just top to bottom, there's just nothing weak on this album. Love it. Master of Reality, number 4. Number 3, and here's one that I've seen a lot lower in rankings, and I've seen it quite high, but this is a very, very solid album. 6th overall studio album, Sabotage from 1975. This one does contain a couple of my favorite songs and favorite riffs. But yeah, this album. Here's the back too. That's pretty cool. And another one of those different logos from every album. But Hole in the Sky, great opener. Symptoms of the Universe. That track. It's fantastic. But my favorite track on this album is Megalomania. I absolutely love that riff. And the breakdown in there. Probably one of my personal all-time favorite Black Sabbath songs, to be honest with you. And yeah, The Thrill of It All. And The Writ. To wrap this one up, The Writ is a fantastic song too. So there's my number 3, leaving 2 left. And as I alluded to earlier, if you know the channel, you probably know that I'm a pretty big Ronnie James Dio fan. But the good thing is I'm a Black Sabbath fan, so the rest doesn't matter. But here's my number 2, 10th overall studio album, second to feature Ronnie on vocals. 1981's Mob Rules. The song is called The Mob Rules. But there's just, this album, every track. I just love this album. Voodoo, The Sign of the Southern Cross, which is just a killer track. Actually, when Bible Black came out years later, it kind of reminded me of that track. Actually, I think Bible Black's a bit heavier than that, but regardless, doesn't matter. Falling Off the Edge of the World, Country Girl, I love that song. Even if it has the word country in it, it still doesn't bother me. Anyways, just a killer album. So there is my number 2, leaving only one left, which you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know, if you know me, that this was going to be my number 1. 9th overall studio album, big change for the band, but I just think they stepped it up into the next stratosphere with Heaven and Hell, 1980. Came at a great time. That's Iron Maiden's first album came out in 1980. Judas Priest, British Steel, just so many good albums. What was Saxon doing at the time? They were a year away from Wheels of Steel and stuff, but just a great time. Great time to be a Black Sabbath fan. And, after Never Say Die, come on. This is a massive upgrade and a fantastic album. We don't have to name, do we have to name some tracks? Maybe we will, but they're every track. Let's go with that. Neon Nights, Children of the Sea, Lady Evil. One of my favorite riffs of Black Sabbath. The epic Heaven and Hell, for sure. Die Young, Walk Away, Lonely as the World. But there is my Black Sabbath ranking. I hope you enjoyed this one and all the little babble that I had in between. But until next time, stay heavy.